The stunned silence in the room tells me that you really struck a chord. First of all, I want to thank you, Mr. Paranspe, for a masterclass in what each one of us has to do as flag bearers of this industry. We didn't want to lose the chance of him being here as the keynote speaker and the chief guest. I want to take the opportunity to really ask him a few questions around a few topics, because in today's world, where Mr. Paranspe, it's difficult for individuals to stay in one company for 37 months, you carved out a remarkably inspiring journey over 37 years. So that's where I want to begin first. I'm sure this journey must have been fraught with ups and downs and twists and turns. And very often when people ask you to share your success stories, there must be tons of them. I want to begin by asking you, and today it's very commonplace to talk of a career ladder that's not linear. But when I reflect on your career choices, you've done many things which were probably at that point very different. I want to start by asking you, are there any failures that shaped you apart from the successes?
Several failures. Hello. Yeah, I think there are several failures, Bhushan, inevitably. But a comment on the lighter side. The fact that I stayed for 37 years is evidence that Newton's law of inertia still holds. But listen, you can't work in any organization without experiencing moments of failure. I did too, quite a few of them. But I'd probably call out this one, which I'm going to talk about, because it was a huge failure, and it was my first failure. And as a context, and I'm going to say this not wanting to sound immodest, but after joining the company for about 12, 13, 14 years, I was very successful, some could say wildly so. I hadn't missed my targets for the first 14, 15 years of being in the company. And while that's good, but it also is not so good, because I was wholly unprepared for what might happen later. So in 2001, I got into a role, and if I hadn't missed a target for the first 14 years of my work, in the next 2 years, there was not a single target that I committed to which I was able to deliver. Targets set at the beginning of the year had to be revised by April. What I said I'd do in April by June was impossible. What I said in September was by the end of the year, even that was not delivered. So you can imagine what I went through in that period. Extreme angst, extreme frustration, self-doubt. There were periods when I would wake up in the middle of the night, not manage to fall asleep, simply not knowing what else I could do. I tried every trick that I'd learned. Nothing seemed to work. And I was losing sleep for sure, and I started losing hair as well, I think, at that stage. And it was in one of those nights when I woke up at 3:34 and I was tossing in my bed, unable to fall asleep and feeling absolutely helpless because I simply didn't know what I'm going to do going to office. I had nothing else left to try. And at that moment, something snapped. Something snapped in the sense of I said, I surrender. And surrender not in the sense of giving up, but surrender in the sense of not worrying too much in terms of what the outcome will be. And I simply said, just go, do what you think is right, and don't worry about the outcome. That's really what happened at that moment. And I went to office in a bizarre way. I felt lighter than I'd ever felt in the last 18 months when I was dealing with this issue. And in a strange sort of way, I started doing what I thought was right, and results started coming. And in 6 months' time, we were seeing a turnaround, etc. And the question that went through my mind is, what happened? I reflected a lot. Why did I fail? What was going on? Etc. And there were 4 lessons that I got out of that failure, which I thought I must share with all of you. The first one was, always do the right thing. There are simply no shortcuts to success. And it's something that I've believed growing up. I've always believed that, for me, doing the right thing is like a law. that when you do the right thing, right outcomes follow. For me, it's like gravity. Just like when you drop something, every time it falls down. I've always believed that when you do the right things, the right outcomes will follow. And shame on me, for that 18-month period, I did everything but the right thing. The problems were structural in nature, needed a strategic response, and I was doing tactical stuff. It simply wouldn't work. There was no question about it. So that was my first lesson. The second lesson was coming out of one more thing. Why was it that I was not doing the right thing? Was the problem so complicated that it took me 18 months to figure out what to do? And when I look back and say, holy shit, no. It was blindingly obvious what needed to be done. And yet I hadn't done it. Why? Because I thought I was too smart, I was too cute for myself. If it was going to cost a lot of money, I thought I could do it in less money, I could do it faster. And I realized then that however expensive a solution might be, the cheapest it will ever be is now. I delayed taking the tough calls early on because they were expensive. 18 months later, they were far more expensive because I'd allowed that issue to linger on for that period of time. So the second big lesson was, however difficult it is, however expensive it is, the cheapest it will ever be is now. The third lesson I learned, again observing my own behavior. In that period, I did everything that you should not do. I behaved like a victim. I was in denial of the problem. I first did not even acknowledge how serious the issue was which required a response. Complete denial. And then I behaved like a victim. Not my fault, market is not good, predecessor has left me, all of this. And I learned at that stage, and I said to myself, never a victim, never in denial, is not just a good for business, it's also a good life lesson to live by. And the fourth thing I realized, based on how I was feeling at that point in time, I was destroyed. My confidence was absolutely at rock bottom. And I realized why that was happening, because I was attaching too much importance to the outcome that I was delivering. And I realized you are not your result, either good or bad. And it is only this conviction that you are not your result which allows you to go through these bad periods without having your self-confidence destroyed. Because if your self-confidence is destroyed, there is no chance you will succeed. But it is also this conviction and belief which allows you to go through your good times without getting a swollen head and thinking you're God's gift to mankind. Yeah? So those were my 4 lessons. And every time I have strayed or from any one of these, I've paid a heavy price.
Very powerful life lessons. Can I have a round of applause from all of you? I think, again, I saw several heads nodding there in the background. That just tells me that, all of us go through these similar experiences. The question is, how do we respond? As we always say, when you have your ups and downs, your character doesn't change. I think that was very powerful. You've done so many things in your life, from joining as a management trainee to being the chairman, to being on the executive committee for 11 years, being the youngest CEO of Unilever in India. If I were to ask you to characterize, and the reason I'm asking that question is, for those in the room who still remember, Mr. Paranspe was at an OPPI event probably 18 years ago. And there was a question that was asked. That room was full of brand managers, and somebody had asked him, what should we focus on? And his answer was very simple: focus on your current job. My question to you is, how do you keep yourself curious with everything that you achieved, including the current role of a vice chairman of Infosys now?
I'm saying you just have to be honest with yourself, and you'd realize there is so much more that you don't know. There is so much that you have to learn. And unless in today's world, more than any other stage, if you do not remain hungry and curious and wanting to learn and relearn, you'll become irrelevant very soon. Yeah. In my case, it happened easy because, again, it will sound, I don't want it to sound badly, but the reality is, I do not see myself any differently from a very ordinary person with above average intellect at best, but desperately hungry to be a little better every day. So the only thing that I bring is wanting to be a little better every day. And I've always hated the advice that people give you, that you must try and be the best in the world and best in the world. And that's terrible advice. Because in a world of 7 billion people, how can you ever be? There will always be someone who's going to be better than you. So why try? But the moment you say that I want to be the best version that I can be, I want to be better than what I've been yesterday, there is no limit to this opportunity to get a little better. So I've embraced this philosophy that simply allows me, it first helps me acknowledge how much I don't know and how much I can learn from every single person. This is not a loose comment. I genuinely mean that. And that just keeps you humble and grounded and wanting to learn a little more.
Very powerful again, very powerful. Yeah, please. Well, I know there are a lot of ex-Unilever alumni sitting in the room, including Dr. Hasid Joshipura sitting at the back. And I've always heard about the culture that Unilever has always had. The culture of no pomposity, the culture of always doing what is right for the organization, but also more to the customers and the consumers that you're serving. And therefore, I want to pivot to the second theme around culture. You've created a culture. I mean, the financials are an outcome. For a company to be 65,000 crores or more in annual revenues in India, the market cap in excess of 650,000 crores or what have you. How do you go about any nuggets for the young and the not so young people in the room in terms of what is it the call out for us in terms of shaping the cultures in our individual organizations?
Listen, this is a very broad question. It will take forever to discuss this because everyone recognizes the criticality of culture. All organizations go through periods of culture change and things of that sort, and yet most culture change initiatives fail. My reflections over this is that often we get a few things wrong. Sometimes culture and culture change initiatives become the responsibility and fads run by the HR organization. That's a problem. Culture has to be owned by the CEO of the organization, not the HR part of the organization. And then the question is, what is a good culture? And I think we again make a mistake at times thinking about it. And I'll give you some examples. We all think that a culture, if you had a culture where everyone has a voice, everyone can speak up, everyone can debate, everyone can express an opinion, is a good culture. Now, maybe it is not. And I'll give you a simple example. If you were running an army, if you were the head of an army, is this a great culture to have? No. Because in the army, what you want is a culture of uncompromising discipline, unquestioned obedience. When you get an order, people follow. They don't sit and spend time asking 5 questions, is this a good? Because a second delayed is the difference between life and death. I use this deliberately an extreme example to show that culture that is required is contextual. And therefore, I define culture. You need the culture that amplifies your strategy. So thinking of culture in isolation of strategy is a big mistake. So figure out what is your strategy, what will help you win, and then define a culture which is wholly consistent and will give the best chance of that strategy to succeed. 2 quick examples. If you are Walmart, we know that Walmart's entire proposition is around cost conscious, is about being the cost leader and offering the lowest cost products to its people. That's its reason to exist and its point of difference. So Walmart then creates a culture where thrift, where cost consciousness, where frugality is deeply valued. They do everything. Their offices are sparse, nobody will travel business class, and they do everything which is consistent with that. Some people don't like it. If you don't like it, don't join. That's okay. They make those choices. But coherence between strategy and the culture. Now, cost consciousness is important, but if you're Apple, for example, Is cost consciousness not important for Apple? No, it's important, but what is more important is innovation. Yeah. So if Apple tried to run an organization like Walmart, would that be appropriate for Apple? Absolutely not. Apple needs to create a context where innovation will thrive. Yeah. And this is, so the question I'm saying is, don't think of culture in general terms. Figure out what's your unique point of difference by which you want to win, and then start figuring out what's that culture which will magnify that strategy and give it the best chance of success. And I think therefore the CEO must own culture and not relegate it or delegate it to somebody else.
Very powerful again. Thank you very much for that. People are making copious notes as you saw talking. I'm going to shift the gears now because I'm also conscious that everything that we do, whether it's the pharmaceuticals industry or the FMCG, eventually we have the patients at the core or the consumers or customers. In today's context where inciting customer centricity still remain at the core of everything we do, what's your assessment of where technology is helping us shape all of this, especially in terms of the agility, the decision making? Any call out to the young brand managers and the brand teams in this room?
Firstly, listen, I think there can be no organization where this won't be the central conversation going on in terms of what's happening with technology, how is it going to change the way we operate, the way we behave, the impact on our roles, the decision making. So this is reality. I think only time will tell how this will pan out in specific terms. But irrespective of this, some things remain unchanged. Technology may change how we do things, but success will still require you to be obsessively focused on delivering on what consumers need. That is not going to go out of fashion. That's for sure. Yeah? So the only thing that we have to figure out is what do we need to do and how do we leverage technology which exists today to get the right insights, to be able to serve faster, quicker, with agility, to be able to serve the consumer better than anyone else. And the people who do that will be the people who win. Technology will be a means and a tool to enable us to do that. Nothing beyond that. And I think, but the technology changes are not trivial. Yeah? They're probably the most defining conversation in every organization will have to be around that, because it will require rewiring and rethinking of everything that we've done. And I don't think the challenge there is intellectual. I think intellectually we all get it. The challenge is all of us. We will all feel threatened. We all are conditioned with decades of working in a certain manner. And in a way, while large companies have many advantages, they are singularly disadvantaged when it comes to this, because they're dealing with the legacy of what exists at this moment, while small companies have no background, they have no history, they have nothing to dismantle, they have very little resource and everything to disrupt others. So I would really say that's a challenge in terms of how we deal with.
No, thank you very much. I know we could go on for several hours with Mr. Paranspe sitting here. It's indeed a masterclass to have you. And when I reached out to you, this was the reason, because I know for a momentous occasion like this, and to stay relevant as OPPI, I think there couldn't have been a better person than you to come as the keynote speaker for us. On behalf of everyone, I just want to thank you immensely for being here, sparing your time, and more importantly, spending time with these thought-provoking ideas, and of course the call to action. I'm sure next time we meet you, we'll have more stories to share apart from the ones that you picked up with the GLP-1 analogs. I'm sure innovation is what will drive us even further. Thank you once again to you for taking out time.
Thank you, Mr. Akshikar. Thank you, Mr. Paranspe. May I request Mr. Akshikar to kindly present a token of appreciation.